I think it is safe to say that this episode of Doctor Who is possibly one of the most divisive ever. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I am a geek, you are watching Kevin the Geek, and this is time to do my review of the sort of mid-series finale of Series 6. This was episode 7, and it was A Good Man Goes to War, and obviously at this point this is where the show kind of took a sort of a summer break. And then, of course, you had Torchwood Miracle Day, which sort of aired in between the two halves of Series 6. And it's come at a good time for me because, of course, this coming weekend is when Doctor Who Series 14 / Season 1 is starting. Obviously, the new series with Ncuti Gatwa. So my plan is to do reactions for all of those episodes. So if you're new, then please do subscribe, turn on notifications, go back and check out all of my various reviews I've done for Doctor Who. I've done rankings, I've basically done all the episodes up to this point, and I've even done some classic stuff. I've done some classic reactions because I've not really ever seen any much really of classic Doctor Who, so I've at least done so far the first two serials, An Unearthly Child and the Daleks. So you can check them out on the channel. I want to do more Classic Who in the future as well. But for right now, we are, of course, talking about A Good Man Goes to War and that revelation.
I'm Melody. I'm your daughter.
Now, I put out, within a number of different Doctor Who groups I'm part of on various social media this sort of last week. I don't normally do that when it comes to doing reviews because I like to give my own thoughts and my own opinions. I will always do a rewatch so I get a feeling and, to be honest, refresh my memory in a lot of instances because most of these episodes I've not watched in quite a big sort of period of time. And the main thing I wanted to get a sense of was what people's opinions was of that revelation. That Revasong is the daughter of Amy and Rory. Because I always seem to be in the minority within my group of friends. I was shocked and I quite liked that revelation when, of course, it first happened. Most of the other people in my circle of friends who does like Doctor Who, most of them really hated it. And some of them were like, I'm not watching the rest of the show now. I'm done. I'm done with it. And the sort of comments that I was seeing in a lot of these groups were, I will say, mixed. You had some people who really liked it and still really like it. Because I also asked, has your opinion sort of changed over time? And most of those people said, no, my opinion is still the same as what I thought of it in the very first instance. A lot of people were shocked with it and liked it. Other people just detested it. So it's a really divisive sort of cliffhanger. And I would say is probably, I'd say the next time the sort of the show got as divisive as it was probably, well, one, when Jodie Whittaker got announced as the 13th Doctor, but then also the whole Timeless Child thing, which of course I will get to in the future. I will get to both of those and I'll give you my thoughts at those points. But right now we're talking about this. And you know what? With time passing, I don't mind it as an idea and a concept. I think the results and the stuff that happens afterwards, I think that could have been handled better. But the actual revelation, I still don't actually mind that much. I think it's the stuff afterwards that's where I more have a potential issue with. And I'll talk about that more in the future as we go into the second half of Series 6. Which obviously I'm going to do later on this year once this new series of Doctor Who has finished airing and I've done my reactions and reviews and that for those. But I'll say, yeah, the actual moment that happened, I think that is really strong. I think the emotion that was delivered from Alex Kingston when she sort of broke the news to Amy and Rory, I thought that was a great moment. I loved that childlike glee and awkwardness.
But you and I,
That for me was a great little moment there as well. I think that just had a lot of humour, which you needed. You really needed by this point, because this is quite possibly, at this moment in time, from everything that I've seen of Doctor Who, this is probably the darkest point in Doctor Who. I won't say within the Whoniverse, because that, I don't think anything really tops Torchwood Children of Earth. That is the darkest that this show has ever gone. And I saw a thing recently, and someone was asking, had that been a Doctor Who story, which Doctor would have been best to handle that one? And I reckon, for me, from New Who anyway, I reckon that would have been either an Eccleston story or a Capaldi story. I don't see how you could have done that with Smith, with Tennant, or even with Jodie Whittaker. And actually, you know what? I'll say at this point of what we've seen so far, I can't see that being a Ncuti Gatwa story either. Because I like Ncuti Gatwa. I think he's fun. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in the newest series. But I'm going off tangent a little bit. So back to A Good Man Goes to War. Yeah, it's dark. It's really dark. And I think there are stuff that I do have issues with, and you know what I'm like. Well, if you're new to my Doctor Who, you may not know, but I get very nitpicky, because the way I do my Doctor Who reviews is I always give a score at the end of the review, so make sure you stay tuned to the end for that. But I always give 10 categories a score out of 10, and that helps me when I do rankings and reviews, so I can kind of see which episodes I think are better or worse than others. And I think Matt Smith was great. I think Amy and Rory, I will say Rory. I think Rory, for the first time in a while, shone higher than Amy probably in this story.
Oh God, I was going to be cool. I wanted to be cool. Look at me.
You're okay. A crying Roman with a baby. Definitely cool.
Rory was fantastic. He really deserves his standing now as the companion. I think there was always that risk that Rory could end up being a bit of a Mickey. I think Mickey, in the end, kind of got there, but with a lot of false starts. And Rory could have been there. I mean, I've said it in some of the early reviews for this series that I hated the whole death fake outs that they kept doing. But here, I just love the fact that he got a real badass moment at the start of this episode.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Now, I did put that moment, that badass moment, in a moment where I think it was when I was doing the best cold opens for Doctor Who. I'm pretty sure I put that in there. I mean, I've not rewatched that video. I did that about a year ago, and that's actually my highest viewed Doctor Who video to this point. Nearly 4,000 views. So I'm really delighted that did so well. So please do go and check out some of my rankings, because that one did really well. The others haven't really ever done that well, but I put a lot of work and effort into them, and I do have an idea for one at the moment that I really would like to do. So stay tuned. I'm going to work on trying to do that in the near future. But yeah, Rory had a great moment in that bit, but then later on, I loved that bit where he came in with the baby, and he's all with Amy, and then she's like, "Oh, crying Roman with a baby, definitely cool. Yeah, that was just such a great heartfelt moment. And yeah, Rory has done well in this series. He really, really has. I think the writers have really got behind him, and I think the audience did as well. I think a lot of people really got on board with Rory and really respected him as a companion, which I don't feel they ever really did with Mickey. He was just sort of like, he's that tagger on, but they didn't really, bond with him, I think, in the way that Rory has. So I will say fair play to Arthur Darvill for doing that. I think, it says a lot for sticking with it and delivering a great performance after great performance and, keeping the people on board. Now, the things I have a nitpicks with. First of all, one that I didn't really have an issue with at the time, because I didn't really, I think, place it and really have that understanding of it. And that's the whole thing with the fat one and the thin one. Watching it back this time, that was just really cringy.
Hello, I'm the thin one. This is my husband. He's the fat one.
Don't you have names?
We're the thin, fat, gay, married Anglican Marines. Why would we need names as well?
Ugh, that doesn't sit very well with me in the modern day. And this is always going to happen. You're always going to have differences of opinions that you yourself have had in the past. I just don't like it as a line. It feels too cheesy and on the nose, and in some ways a little bit homophobic. And the fact that the fat one, that literally the first one to die in this is literally the fat one when he gets taken into the room and gets delivered to the headless monks. And the dialogue within that scene is something I really don't like as well, because it's very confusing. Because at first, like the voice that comes over the top, it says, welcome applicant to the Order of the Headless Monks. So you're thinking, okay, so he is choosing to apply to this Order of the Headless Monks despite not knowing who they are, what they entail, or anything like that. And then it turns out, actually, no, you are just being given to us. You are just being given to us, and, he loses his head, clearly. And then after that, they don't really do anything. You have a couple of shots of the thin one when he's within the crowd of the soldiers, but you don't really have anything. And that, I feel, that should have been something that they really should have honed in on and had that moment where maybe he realised that his husband has basically been killed and has been turned into a headless monk, and maybe he could have had like a change of heart. I think that would have given some really good stakes within this. Lorna Bucket as a character, I liked it and I didn't like it. Especially that scene.
You don't remember me.
Hey, of course I remember. I remember everyone.
It's just that felt so sad. Because it's clear that he actually didn't remember who she is. Or potentially it's a situation that happens in his personal future, so it hasn't happened to him yet. The fact that he turns around afterwards and said, who was she? That was a really sad moment for that. But this whole battle, this has obviously been coming. This has been building. And what I do like is the fact that they have really built up to this moment. I think if you had taken a lot of stuff out of some of the earlier episodes, this could have felt really out of place for the Doctor. Specifically this Matt Smith version. I suppose the Doctor in general, because we always know that they've had... they've had different personalities when they regenerate, and they have different mindsets, and you see that very clearly when we get to Capaldi. That's probably the biggest tonal shift I think that we've had in the new era since we came back. Because up until this point, Matt Smith has been a little bit similar to David Tennant, very aloof at times, but with that sort of dark and serious undertones. he does go a lot darker than Tennant ever did. And there were hints at the way that Tennant would go dark within the modern era. I think probably the closest and the best example you could probably give would maybe be the one at the end of the two-parter in series 3 with the Family of Blood. I think, because they're all about, they're wanting immortal life, and he gave it to them, just not in the manner that they wanted. That, and of course in the Waters of Mars with the whole Time Lord Victorious thing.
For a long time now, I thought I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm the winner. That's who I am. The Time Lord Victorious.
That, and I said this in the review of the Waters of Mars, that felt a bit of a precursor to this moment. And I had wanted to see that build up towards the Time Lord Victorious, because I personally liked that ending. I liked the fact that the Doctor, going unchecked, can go down that really dark path. And you've seen it in so many TV shows, so many movies, that people can be, honestly, some of the best people. Something happens to them and they end up going down the wrong path. And it's happened probably in real life. I'm sure that most people will have known of someone who has taken the wrong turn at some point. And it requires the right people to kind of keep you on that straight and narrow. And of course, with the Time Lord Victorious part, it was the fact that he didn't have a regular companion. And if it wasn't for Adele in that moment, Adelaide, not Adele, Adelaide, then he would have continued going down that dark path and maybe turned into a being, similar to the Master in a way. But he didn't. But I think that darker sense was still kind of bubbling away under the surface. And so, if you look at this episode out of context, you think how easy it was for him to go dark. Like that scene with Colonel Manton, the whole Colonel Runaway scene.
I want you to tell them your name. Oh, look, I'm angry, that's new. I'm really not sure what's going to happen now.
I love that scene. And I think of the people that I know, that seemed to be a bit of an outlier. I really like that. Again, because it was a build-up of a number of different things that have happened over a period of time. You saw how angry the Doctor got with the Daleks in Victory of the Daleks.
I am your soldier! You are my enemy! And I am yours!
You saw how kind of angry he got in the sort of two-parter opener to this series. He didn't really get that angry in the Pirates episode. He did go a little bit dark within the Doctor's wife with House, especially that moment.
Fear me. I've killed hundreds of Time Lords.
Fear me. I've killed all of them.
And then, of course, he went really dark in the preceding story, in the whole Flesh one, with the Almost People. Because there was that moment in, I think it was the second episode, when Amy believed the Doctor was the Ganger Doctor. He pushed her up against a wall and he was so angry and so furious.
I can feel them as they work each day, knowing the time was coming for them to be thrown away again. Not again, please. And then they are destroyed and they feel death, and all they can say is why.
So we've seen so many instances where the Doctor can go really dark. And this is where it culminates. The fact that he has been misled and made out to be this figurehead. And we've seen it for such a long time, and we've heard it, like the Daleks talk about him being the oncoming storm, and you had that brilliant moment, I think, in Journey's End, the Series 4 finale, where Davros is saying, we're revealing the soul of the Doctor. You take these ordinary people and you turn them into villains, into weapons, and how many people have died in your name? And that's why I think I liked all of this. But then again, there are still things that I will nitpick about. Some of the supporting cast in that, of course, this is where we get introduced to Madame Vastra, to Jenny, to Strax, and I believe apparently there was a sort of a mini-sode or a webisode or something which kind of showed the immediate aftermath. Because I always thought back, I was thinking, didn't Strax die in this episode, in that final battle? So I think there is something that probably explains the sort of the immediate aftermath bit, which if there is, I need to see that. Maybe I'll do it as a reaction on the channel, maybe at some point. Then the idea of a Sontaran providing or serving penance as a nurse to humans, I like that as an idea. And what I do also like, of course, you have Dan Starkey, who played Strax. He was also playing one of the Sontarans in the Sontaran Stratagem two-parter. And I like that when both of those characters seemed to die, they were two very different opposites. You had the first one in the Sontaran Stratagem, where he gets shot by Colonel Mace.
You will face me, sir.
Wonderful. But in this episode, you have that very different scenario and the different emotions to dying in battle.
I've often dreamed of dying in combat. I'm not enjoying it as much as I hoped.
So there was some good and some bad stuff. I mean, I think the comedy moments and some of the comedy lines from Strax was great, particularly towards the boy and towards the other general. I hope to meet you one day in the glory of battle. Because it's still showing he's still got that Sontaran nature to him, whilst at the same time he's like, oh yeah, I can't do it because I'm serving penance to you. I'm a nurse. But then you had some, ones that are not so great with the whole, I can perform magnificent quantities of lactic fluid. You're like, eesh, yeah, now you're maybe going a little bit too far with it. But Vastra and Jenny, I thought that was a great introduction. I love them too as a pairing. I thought they're fantastic. And I think they were probably the two best parts of the Paternoster gang. So it was always nice when they did come back, because I liked them too, personally, I did. But I was never quite sure, they never quite made it clear, was Madame Vastra part of the group from the Silurian two-parter last series? Because obviously you had Neve McIntosh playing two identical Silurians in that, and I don't believe that it's made out that they are clones in the same way that Sontarans are, which would make sense why you would have Dan Starkey coming back. But within this one, is it more that it's just sisters and they happen to look a lot more similar? Like I said, it wasn't really made very clear with that one. Not that it's a major thing, but like I said, I get very nitpicky at these kind of things.
Why would you need me? I'm old. I'm fat. I'm blue. You can't need me.
The one character I just didn't buy was what's his face? The blue one. I can't even remember his name. He's that forgettable for me. But I hated the line. I hated it back then. I still hate it now. That no, why do you need me? I'm old. I'm fat. I'm blue. Oh, you're just like, ugh. I mean, it makes sense. Because literally, why do you need him? And really, did he add anything really to the story? Not really. Dorium, that was his name, Dorium Maldover. He didn't really add too much to it. And River. Again, they never quite made it clear. The River that Rory speaks to at the start of the episode, was that then the River that later then appeared? Was that River at that moment in her time frame, or was that an earlier River? Because the way that River, that Rory was speaking to, knew that it was the whole thing about the Battle of Demon's Run, that would make it more sense to suggest that it was the earlier River in her time frame who has been there and has been to that moment, which would make sense then why that River couldn't then go into the past and and help out. But then if that's the case, then why couldn't they get that earlier River and just get her involved earlier in the fight, if that makes any sense to you? I hope that does. You know what I'm like with my brain. I have random thoughts and I can't quite always put it into the right words.
Mr. Maldivar, get back here! Arm yourself, fool! Dorian!
Mr. Maldivar?
The last thing I just want to say is relating to the music. I love music. Anyone who's seen my reviews know that the right music at the right time really, enhances a scene. And of course, we had so much moments within this one with the song Melody Pond, which is one of my favourite tracks. And I did do a ranking of some of my favourite Murray Gold tracks last year. Please check out that ranking. That was a great one. That song is on that list. But the one thing that always, I don't know, it felt a bit off. And I couldn't quite place my finger on it until I rewatched it this time around. It was the whole Headless Monk battle cry. And I liked that very sort of and that sort of choral kind of feel to it, and that sort of almost like a chant. I think to make it slightly bit better, what I would have preferred would be if they hadn't had other instrumental music playing underneath it. If they just had that as raw sound and that raw kind of Headless Monk chanting, that I think would have really amplified that final battle scene. That would have just made it so much more tense, so much more raw, I think. And you did have it at one point. I think it was the moment when Dorian got his head chopped off by the monks, which again was a stupid moment, because it's literally like he's making such a big point of saying they're dangerous, and he's like, oh my god, the attack prayer, and then literally moments later he's like, oh, they'll understand, they're old friends of mine. You're like, which way do you want to go with it? In all honesty, yeah. So at times there's a bit of issues at times, but I will definitely say the final twist with the baby being a ganger, I did not see coming. The twist that River was the daughter of Amy and Rory, I did not see coming. Like a lot of people sort of put in their comments when I kind of asked the question, I was similar to a lot of people that thought actually it might actually be a future incarnation of the Doctor, which would make sense, but then at the same time, that would be why it's a bit weird, and probably explains his reaction when he goes like, oh, well, that would be interesting, his reaction. It would fit within context if it had turned out that it was a future Doctor, because then you're like, oh, but I've kissed myself. Ooh, that's a bit weird. But yeah, I'm going to round up the review then, because this is definitely quite a bit longer than most of the reviews that I've done recently. But I am, of course, going to score this episode. So, like I said, I give 10 categories of score out of 10, and that gives me an overall score, which I then use to give it a grade. So, this is my score for A Good Man Goes to War. And so, A Good Man Goes to War has scored 82 marks out of 100, which gives it an A grading. And this would be, at this point, probably the strongest start to a series. If we measure the reviews that I've done in the past, at the midway point, this is the strongest it's ever been. But a lot of people have recently said that they think Series 6 is one of the weakest. And the problem is, I think it's the second half. I'm obviously gonna check out a lot of the episodes in the second half, which, to be honest, are the ones that I've gone back to the least over time in rewatches, and that probably explains it. So you can probably imagine the average score is probably going to drop from here on out when we get to the second half. But I am looking forward to rewatching some of those. Some of those I've probably only watched literally once before, literally the very first time it airs, and I probably haven't rewatched them since. So it's going to be interesting when we get to that point. But of course, if you are new, please don't hesitate to subscribe. Please do subscribe. Drop your comments down below, and of course, do stay with me because next week I will be doing weekly reactions. For the most part, there'll be a couple of weeks when I'm on holiday in June, so the sort of tailing end of this series of Doctor Who will be a little bit delayed, but the plan is basically to do a edited condensed version for YouTube, and then the full reaction available on my Google Drive for anyone who wants to see my full uncut reaction. So that will all be available, and I will of course give you my thoughts after each episode as well. Not in the manner that I do within this, with giving them the scores. I'll do that, later down the line when a bit more time has passed. I can, after having a thought and think about them. So that's what I'll do at that point. And then, of course, once we've finished with that, I will come back to the second half of Series 6 and beyond, of course. So that is going to do it for now. Thank you so very much if you've stuck with me to this point. For now, my name is Kevin. I am a geek, and you have been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.